Good morning, everyone. Type in chat if you can hear me. And I'm a little bit late, but I'm gonna quickly review my morning. Um, the market decided to dump, or it waited for me to leave before it finally dumped. I tried getting some kind of big movement for an hour. Unfortunately, I couldn't really get anything. Um, this morning really could have been great. I was in a lot of great setups that just for one reason or another just didn't play out to their fullest potential, or not even close to their fullest potential. But I'm going to review my options trades and the analysis behind those right now. And yeah, kind of go over that. So, with the pre market bias, there was none. We had CPI this morning. CPI seemed a little bullish. It came in really hot in, you know, last month. January's came in pretty hot. February's cooled off. So I was fairly bullish. And we had this compression going on since those CPI levels. So I'm kind of looking for an upside break, kind of out of the gate. That's what I'm looking for. Um, I do end up having this trend line though. Well, market opens. We're kind of wicking around, nothing major, and then we break to the upside on NQ. ES doesn't quite break to the upside, but we move up significantly on ES as well. It was right during the next candle when it began invalidating that selling wick that I filled calls for QQQ. And you can see here on this candle specifically, um, the NASDAQ actually had a green candle. So I end up taking QQQ calls here. I only entered half size though, and the reason for that was, this was kind of a minor pivot. We were potentially sweeping it. However, I am bullish for pre-market high. That's my next major pivot. That's typically what I'm going to go for. If this will let me drag up my stop loss, that'd be awesome. This was roughly my stop loss right around here. But I was only half size, kind of looking for an excuse to add my second half. Um, I almost averaged up on this candle, but when ES closed like that, I don't know. It kind of made me feel like ES was going to come back down. I was bullish for ES to break this trend line to the upside, though. Um, but we ended up getting this potential reversal candle. So I decided to wait a little bit longer. I'm like, all right, if we invalidate these selling wicks, I'm going to average up. That's going to be very bullish. That's going to look great, right? If we invalidate these selling wicks here, I'm going to average up and I'll take it to the pre-market high. Almost didn't quite, and then we started dumping. And ES had a lower low here, right here. And right when it made the lower low, this is when I actually decided to add on, take as an average down instead of an average up, even though I expected to average up. Right when we swept this low, none of my tools are working right this morning. Right when we swept this low, started forming a buying wick, I did take my average down. So now I was in a normal size position and it ended up being like a glorious average down. My average didn't really drop a bunch though. I filled initially at 6.7. My ad was 6 flat. I think it dropped to like 57 cents, but I filled it 60 cents flat. My average was only like 63. Now I was green. I'm like, all right, I'm going to trim a little bit if it makes this higher high. But, when the time actually came and it did make the high, I only trimmed roughly 1/3 of my position. I only trimmed a little bit because it was so close to PT. NQ is so much stronger than ES. ES invalidated a majority of that drop. I only trimmed probably around a third. So I trimmed it. I got 80 cents for 26% gains on that trim. However, we did end up dropping, unfortunately, and I stopped out. When did I stop out? I stopped out on, yeah, that candle. I stopped out on this candle. So it was painful. I stopped out at 48 cents for a 23% loss. But unfortunately, because I only trimmed a little bit, because it was so close to my price target, I actually ended that trade red. I actually ended up with like minus 15-ish loss on that trade. So a fairly small loss, but that's pretty frustrating. Green to red trades are always frustrating. And that one had really, really, really high odds of playing out. And I wasn't necessarily flipping bearish because now ES was in heavy demand. But we do have this CPI move, and I know that there's pretty much no support under here. So if price action starts looking bearish, I'm willing to take puts down to the low of the CPI candle because I know it's just pretty much a fair value gap. Well, we bounce. I'm starting to think I'm going to re-enter calls. It finishes with a selling wick, so I don't do that, and it ends up coming back down. So I was really close to re-entering calls. But on this candle, it looked like the Nasdaq actually started flipping a little bit weaker than QQQ. Looking back on it, this would have been a decent candle to enter on. I did not enter on that candle, unfortunately. Very unfortunately, looking back on it, the Nasdaq had this pivot here, and I really the biggest reason why I didn't enter puts here is just because I still had some bullish bias left over, and ES was in demand. But looking back on it, 647 was an excuse to at least fill Q puts half size, but we ended up dumping. So I'm like, all right, well, we've swept the lows now. Now I'm starting to be bearish. Even though ES is in heavy demand, I'm thinking this demand cluster is going to break right here. So I'm kind of looking for an excuse to get into puts. We start bouncing a little bit. This is looking okay. Maybe it's not looking okay for puts because we just swept this low. And that is kind of a bullish liquidity sweep. But if we invalidate this bounce, I will be in puts because I'm starting to lean bearish for this demand to break if this bounce invalidates. Right? It's pretty common sense, very high probability. So right here, I'm just about to enter puts, and I pretty much say if the next candle opens bearish, I'm going to fill puts. Well, I don't know what the next candle was, but it was like the craziest candle ever. It opened bearish. I already had filled puts. I already had filled QQQ puts on my channel ready to go. All I had to do is hit enter and then fill on Thinkorswim. I hit enter, and right after I hit enter, this candle just exploded to the upside. I'm like, okay, wait, this is news. I ended up entering on this candle anyways. It shot all the way up, came back down. I have no idea what this candle was. It was at a random time too, 6:52 in the morning for me. I have no idea what the deal was. But anyways, it ended up doing what I needed it to do anyway. So I ended up filling puts roughly here. And really, demand was my PT. I'm read by one very small green trade at the moment. Remember, I'm read by like 15% of one normal size trade. So I enter here. And I'm looking for ES to break demand. And I'm looking for NQ CPI low. We start bouncing. This trade starts off pretty red, unfortunately. But we end up flipping back green. Looks good. And this was sketchy. ES hit this level before NQ did. It looked like ES actually flipped weaker. I trimmed very, very, very heavy here because ES hit the next demand. And I got flashbacks of this right here. I'm like, okay, well, not going to make the same mistake again. Really, 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 this should have hit this morning. I don't know why it didn't, but it didn't. Most of the time it will. So because that didn't happen, I trimmed pretty heavy, which was nice. I entered those puts at 72 cents. I got 26% gains. Kind of a week. I expected a lot more than 26%. I mean, this dropped, 71 points on NQ. But I left a runner for not only demand, but a break of this demand. Now it's a double demand. The zones are smaller. I ended up selling the last of it right around break even when it bounced. Here, I believe I sold pretty much the last of it. Yeah, that's pretty much right. 659 is what it said. Yep. So I sold the last of it at break even. It was just a runner. So that was good. I'm back to green on the day. I'm roughly green by like 110% green trade, so nothing crazy. However, I was still kind of eyeballing SPX puts. And I was eyeballing them because it looks like they flipped a lot weaker than NQ. You can see that NQ invalidated the entirety of the 655 candle. ES did not. And that didn't look like a proper bottom to me. So I actually re-entered puts, except on SPX this time here, just half size, and I'm just looking for new low of day. I'm also looking for new low of day because NQ missed demand. I wanted NQ to get demand. But really my PT was ES new low of day. I was only half size on this. I was going to average up if it fell, average down if it swept this high bearishly. And it did end up sweeping the high. It did end up averaging down. I didn't get the best fill. I filled my average down at 245. I think they dropped to like $2.20. But that brought my average down to roughly like 2.65 ish. And no messing around. The millisecond it hit PT, I was out. It's just by pure luck that it decided to reverse right after. Actually, when I actually sent the out alert, I said I probably should leave some runners because, the trend is fairly bearish right now. I feel like it could keep dropping, but I don't care. Right after I sent that, it put in this huge reversal candle. So that was really good. I got 32% gains on that. I got 32% gains on that trade, full size. So now I was green by roughly one green 40% trade, 45% trade ish. So still not, I was still pretty mild green on the day. Very mild green on the day. And we bounce beautifully. I mean, we sweep demand, we sweep the lows, we did everything I want to do. Now I'm starting to think, okay, well, now clearly the Nasdaq is a lot stronger than the S&P. QQQ calls are looking really good here. And I do end up filling QQQ calls on this candle. I filled pretty much right when most of the selling wick invalidated here. And this is my PT. 19,729 is my PT. If it gets this awesome, I'm going to hold runners for this pre-market high. Because by the time it gets there, it invalidates most of the drop. I'm going to be bullish for my original PT of 789. But right now I'm just going for 729 for most of this position. So I fill these QQQ calls at 52 cents. And we start doing beautifully, And I already scaled. By the time this candle closed, I already sold half my position. I was going to wait just for this PT, but, I sold half of my position. I think I got like 20-ish percent. I got right around like 18 to 20% on these calls. Nothing crazy. So sold half of them there. If it hit my here, I would sell another quarter, and then I'll leave the last quarter of my position for this level. So I'm out half, roughly 20-ish percent gains. I realize I didn't type that in my channel, but it's pretty much 20%. I didn't actually do the math. Was looking good to get there. Barely missed it, and yeah, we missed it. And I sold the last bit. I believe it was on this candle. I sold 715. So yeah, it was not good. I actually sold the last for I sold the last bit for a loss. So the 20% that I got, keep in mind I only sold half yet again. At least I sold a little bit more in the first trade, but this was pretty much the same as the first trade. This is when I actually started to get pretty frustrated. Not super frustrated, but I started to get mildly frustrated because it felt like every single trade besides one, which was this one. I mean, this trade was my only full-size win today. So even though I did have a lot of wins and the analysis was pretty decent, it wasn't adding up to a ton P&L-wise, which is pretty frustrating. So I sold half for 20%, and then I'm selling this second half for like minus 10 to 15%. So it ended up being like another tiny 10-ish percent win, unfortunately. However, I pretty much did reverse this trade, and I hopped right into puts after because I'm like, okay, a majority of this bounce invalidated. I want this demand to break. This is what I want here. So I filled it pretty much right at the close of this candle. Right after I exited that, I filled it. The Nasdaq did look weaker than ES. You know, they were kind of in similar locations, but if you compare it to the 712 candle, ES was barely under it, NQ was a lot under it. So I end up switching to QQQ puts here, and I'm looking for new low of day. But it was putting in like so many buying wicks. This was like a very, very, very hard watch. You just put in like 5 buying wicks in a row. 3 of them were huge buying wicks, all of which made lower lows. So I actually trimmed pretty much at demand. We got these 2 buying wicks with lower lows here. When it hit demand, I trimmed a bit. Um, and I was just looking for new low of day. Ended up bouncing. Was not very fun. I got 20% gains, by the way, on that trim. So once again, I think I trimmed a little bit. It was roughly half. I think it was like one contract above half, so maybe like 60% of my position. I trimmed it for plus 20% ish here, right at demand. Um, but it didn't get new low of day, so I didn't sell the entire position. And just like I predicted, I told you guys in chat that this bounce was way, way too predictable. I closed the last of it here. Wasn't willing to have the trade go red. That was kind of my reasoning for exiting here. Wasn't willing to have the trade go red. And it actually did get all the way back up to pretty much gave all except a little bit of my gains back. You know, I trimmed roughly half at 20%, sold the rest. You know, I think I only got like 5% gains on it, maybe, which again adds to my frustration because every freaking trade is barely missing PTs, and I had one full size win. That's it. The only red trade I've had so far was supposed to be a win. It was a green to red trade where I actually trimmed in the green. So adding to the frustration, but again, I'm not willing to have this trade go red. I'm just not willing to do it. You know, I'm up fairly mild green on the day. That only added a little bit. So I'm green by two 25% wins, or roughly two slightly larger size 20% wins, which is not a big green day at all. It's a pretty medium day. However, I did say because now we missed the pivot, if this comes back down, I will be in puts heavy because I'm bearish for not only new low of day to break, I think this demand's going to break. So I actually did enter puts here, and I was actually fairly heavy size. I was heavy in this. I was roughly a 1.5x leverage, my normal, because my PT was so close, which also means you have to have good psychology. If you're just going for a tiny scalp, you can't risk, I guess it's easier to talk about it in futures. You can't risk a 20 tick PT for a 50 tick stop loss. No matter how likely you think it is, that's how accounts are blown, right? So I'm going for a very small PT. I have a tight stop loss, and I was heavy size in this. So I was 1.5x leverage. I actually entered KQQ puts and SPX puts, and pretty much on this candle, I said, well, it looks like it was going to stop out. And it was green there for a little bit. I did get a nice fill, and it was green there, but it was kind of screwed because ES made a lower low, NQ did not. ES is in very heavy demand. You know, I'm still bearish for NQ new low of day, but I got to stop out. So pretty much if this selling wick invalidates here, I'm out. And I stopped out. So that was pretty damn unfortunate. I don't actually remember what my percent loss on that was. Give me 1 second so I can check. I completely forgot what it was. I entered at 64 cents at I sold at 26. Oh, here's the trade. Yeah. It was not a very was not a very big loss on QQQ. SPX was a much bigger loss. SPX was not a good time. With the QQQ contracts, I entered at 64 cents. It's so frustrating, man. They got all the way to 79 cents. So I was up 20% on that trade. It looked like the premiums were pretty bearish. And looking back on it, you guys know that right after I left today, we dumped. I didn't really notice how bearish the premiums were because those contracts really didn't fall much. But anyways, I sold that trade at pretty much 60 cents. I filled a little bit, looks like, because I just market sell at 59 cents. So it was a fairly small loss, but I was heavy size. SPX, on the other hand, um, when I filled this, when I filled it at, when did I fill it? No, this is not even the right trade. There we go. When I filled it at 724, yeah, the SPX took the SPX puts took a freaking beating. I think I took like a 20-ish, 25-ish% loss. It looks like I also didn't have a good fill on those SPX puts as well because I filled at roughly 2.6 and I end up selling at 2.0 flat. So I took like a 25% loss. And keep in mind, I was heavy size. So by that point, now I'm only green by like 120, 115-ish percent trade. So my day went to pretty light green, one green trade. And after seeing that, it's like I'm not willing to. I'm just gonna call it. I'm not. I don't want today just like all these trades to be a green to red day. I'm just gonna call it. I don't really care. Too much, way too many times today. It's my green trades just could not hit PT, and I could not get a full size win for the life of me, except one of them. So this was the only red trade that I had that I didn't trim in the green of. But so it was a decent day. The analysis was fine. Just price action didn't really give me anything. I tried for an entire hour. And then, of course, right after I left, it finally dumped. Would I have re entered though? Probably not, because my re entry, by the time I would have been triggered, this is too early to re enter this candle. I could have re entered here on SPX, but NQ already took out low of day on this candle. So I could have re entered, but again, it would have been a huge risk. Could have easily flipped today red. I wasn't willing to risk it, and that's kind of how you need to navigate whether or not to continue to trade while you're trading in a very very discretionary mode. Everyone's willing to make more money, but if you're not willing to spend more money, if you're not willing to lose more money, you should call it. That perfect psychology, and that's where I got this morning. Just the pent up frustration of all my trades being green to red, or just green to and not hitting PT. I just called it. Wasn't willing to lose more. But that was my morning. Does anyone have any questions whatsoever? If not, that is it for this review. And you guys, side note, as far as the future strategy, which has been taking up most of my time lately, all you guys should have been taking advantage of this strategy. I'm still due for a red day. I've had a red day in 10 trading days now, maybe a little bit more. Yesterday's futures trade was damn near 200 points. It was pretty much 200 points on the NASDAQ, and it did end up having a near perfect sell. I could have got a little bit more, um, but ended up having pretty much a perfect sell and reverse right after. The future strategy has been making me a shit ton of money. Very happy with it. And you guys have all the documentation. You guys have all the data you need to be able to execute that strategy. And if you don't know how to perform liquidity analysis, that lesson is in the TA course, which all of you guys should have watched by now because I pretty much assigned it to you guys on the 6th of this month. When was that? Last Thursday. And it's been nothing but green days since. Now, if you're gonna start trying it, I would go pretty light size because I'm very, very, very due for red day. Um, but it's been fantastic lately. I'm very happy with it, and I am kind of hoping that given price action, as you guys know, I don't trade until 1:30 Eastern, p.m. Eastern. I'm kind of hoping that NQ is somewhere up here by that time, so that I can take it to the CPI high. And based on this bounce, I feel like it could happen. I feel like the market could easily run all the way past new high of day to my initial PT from this morning. But with my luck, it's probably going to get there beforehand. But we'll see. And another side note for that, I'm also going to do November documentation and maybe October documentation. I think it's hard because I think November and December are significantly skewed because of the election and how the market moved due to the election. So the results probably aren't nearly going to be as good. But as far as the refined rules and whatnot, I'm not going to send those out till I do another month or two. But all right, sweet. Well, you guys have a blessed rest of your day. Good luck if you continue to trade. I'll keep you updated on the future strategy updates. And I'll also let you guys know when this video is posted to YouTube.